Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel, and today I'm carrying on with the Casey Anthony trial, and it is still Cindy Anthony, and they continue talking about the 3rd of July when Cindy posted on MySpace. Cindy did speak to Casey about what she posted on there, and she thinks she spoke to her about it probably the day after. They discussed how Kaylee was missing from Cindy's heart because she hadn't seen her. They also discussed how Casey had betrayed Cindy, and Casey said that she needed some time away. She wasn't upset with Cindy. She wasn't punishing her by not letting her speak to or see Kaylee. She just needed some time to sort some things out. And she explained that seeing Jeff again had rekindled a lot of her feelings again. And Casey told her how much she loved her. She just needed to sort things out with her mind, and that Cindy needed to get used to the fact that someday her and Kaylee wouldn't be there anymore. It was at that point that Cindy realised she was being selfish, so Cindy stopped questioning her. Cindy also did bring up with Casey that she felt or had been told that Casey was jealous of her. Casey denied it. They also discussed that Casey left without warning and that Cindy was hurt by that because Cindy had done so much for Kaylee. But the whole purpose of Cindy writing the message on MySpace was due to the fact that Casey had lied to Cindy about where she was, and Cindy was very hurt by Casey lying to her, which was fair enough why she had to do it on MySpace. Without really understanding it and not knowing that everybody could see it. I don't know. After this conversation, Cindy did make sure she called Casey every day and did persist to ask to speak to Kaylee, but she was always told she was either napping or with Jeff or with Jeff's mother or with Zanny. Because of that phone call, Cindy did actually think that she would be seeing Casey and Kaylee after the 4th of July weekend, but then Casey told her that there was something wrong with the car. Cindy did tell George she was speaking to Casey every day, and George would ask if she'd spoke to her. Cindy did tell George just to leave her be. I think Cindy may have thought that if George had have spoke to Casey, it would have just escalated things. So because of the car trouble, Cindy expected Casey and Kaylee home the following weekend, but they received a text telling them that Jeff's mother was getting married and they were going to that. It was an impromptu thing. So she would be home Monday the 14th of July. Casey didn't come home. She told Cindy she was still in Jacksonville and her and Jeff were packing the car to come home the following day, the 15th of July. On the 13th of July, this is when George and Cindy find the letter about Casey's car being towed. They were doing some yard work, and it was Cindy that noticed something on the front door. She says it was kind of hard to see because of the colour of her door and the glare of the sun on the door, and the notice had actually blended into the door. She could see it more as she moved closer. Cindy believes it must have been put there either the Thursday or the Friday before. She said before, they don't use their front door, they're going through the garage. Cindy had no clue who the notice was from because she didn't know who Johnson's Towing was. So she asked George and he had no idea who Johnson's was either. So when George picked up the letter, he called Cindy to tell her what it was about. He told her that Casey's car was in Orlando. So, Cindy thought, hang on, why is her car there? So she tried to call Casey. Cindy told her that she had a lot of explaining to do. Casey did not explain what happened. Cindy said she needed to come home so they could talk. So, as I said before, George went to Johnson's first and he was told how much it would be. then they went back and Cindy went with him because they had to go because both their names were on the car deeds. And obviously someone needed to drive Casey's car home. So before they both went, Cindy went to the bank to get the money they needed. She met George at the house and then they went to Johnson's. When George got to Casey's car and drove it to the front of Johnson's, he said to Cindy that they needed to get home ASAP as this car stinks, and basically said there was no time to talk. When George drove Casey's car into the garage at home, Cindy walked up to the car. She could smell the car and she said, "Oh my gosh, what's wrong with the car?" She said it smelled like something had died in the car. Cindy did learn about the garbage that had been left in the car. George had opened all the windows, all the doors. He'd also taken the battery out of the car because they didn't want Casey coming back and taking off with the car. So who does that normally? They wanted to speak to her. So at this point, they are obviously thinking something is really off. I mean, to take the battery out of a car to stop your daughter taking it because you want to speak to them, it's crazy how they didn't. I don't know. When George went to work, Cindy had a good look around the car and noticed Casey's purse on the front seat. Kaylee's favourite baby doll was in the car seat. Kaylee's backpack was in the trunk of the car too. Some of Casey's clothes and shoes were in there. She said Kaylee's doll smelled of the car, so Cindy took it out, gave it a wipe, sprayed it with Febreze. She also sprayed the car. She said the car smelled like something that she hadn't smelled before, and Cindy has smelled decomp before because of being a nurse. Although Cindy had said what died about the smell of Casey's car, she didn't think something or someone had actually died in it. Personally, if I smelt that in my daughter's car and I hadn't seen her or my granddaughter for that long, it would send alarm bells ringing. It would send me into a panic. Cindy went through Casey's purse and there was Amy Heisinger's resumes in there. She also looked through Kaylee's backpack. There's a picture. When Cindy went to work for a couple of hours, the car was left with the windows, sunroof doors and trunk open, but the garage was shut. On the way to work, Cindy attempted to call Casey. She was unsuccessful. Cindy actually got sent home because her colleagues and bosses knew what was going on, that she hadn't seen Kaylee for over a month, and her director in fact told her to go home. Cindy went straight home, tried calling Casey again, and she still wasn't answering, so Cindy texted Casey to tell her there was a major problem and that they needed to speak about it. Cindy tried to call her friend Amy. She spoke to Amy and made arrangements to pick Amy up, which she did, and she picked Amy up from a Florida mall. She asked Amy to take her to Casey's, which she did, after Cindy had explained to Amy what was going on. Amy knew exactly where Casey was because she had just seen her a couple of hours prior. So Amy took her to Tony's apartment. They decided that Amy would go to the door because Cindy knew that, she didn't want any fuss or any arguments. Cindy stood in the hallway so that when Casey came to the door, she would just see Amy and not her. She saw Amy knock on the door. Cindy didn't see anyone come to the door at first and saw Amy motion for Casey to come out. Casey saw Cindy and Cindy asked her what she was doing there and that they needed to talk. Casey agreed. Cindy asked if Kaylee was there and Casey said she wasn't and said she was with, of course, the nanny. Cindy told her to get her things and to come on, and Cindy walked towards the apartment. She says when she did, she got hit with cigarette smoke from the apartment, and she knew Kaylee wouldn't be in that kind of environment, so Cindy didn't bother to go in and look for her. Cindy said that they had to get Kaylee because they needed to talk and she wanted to see her and wanted to know what was going on. Amy went back downstairs because obviously she could tell it was, you know, an emotional situation and she just wanted to stay out of the way. And Casey reluctantly agreed to go with Cindy but didn't go in and grab any of her stuff. Casey told Cindy that she was going to come back to Tony's after they had spoke, and Cindy said that was fine, but not until she had got some sort of explanation and had seen Kaylee. Cindy, Amy and Casey all got in the car and they drove off. Cindy was questioning where Kaylee was but didn't really want Amy in the middle of it, so she stopped questioning her until she dropped Amy off at home. So when she dropped Amy off, she continued to question Casey about where Kaylee was and said Casey said she'd take her to see Kaylee. So they started to drive around, and then Casey started to make excuses as to why it wouldn't be a good idea to see Kaylee. And at this point, obviously, quite rightly so, Cindy was getting really frustrated. Cindy then started asking questions about why the car had been towed. She didn't get any answers. After driving around for a while, Casey told Cindy to take her back to Tony's, and Cindy said she wasn't going anywhere until she got any answers. Cindy was heading towards home and told Casey that if she didn't get any answers, then she was going to see people that would get them, meaning the police. Cindy pulled into a police substation near where she lived and started to get out of the car, but saw that they were closed. So she got back in the car and told Casey that this was her last chance to tell her what was going on. So, you know, Cindy's had enough. She wants the truth. She's sick of the excuses. She wants to see her granddaughter. So they started arguing and Cindy still wasn't getting any answers, so she called 911 from the car. So then Cindy is saying she wants to bring Casey in for theft of her car and something to do with a bank account, which the judge has already said has nothing to do with the charges Casey faces. The operator tells Cindy that her jurisdiction falls under the sheriff's office, which I think wasn't open at the time, so Cindy drove home. Just as she was getting home, Lee called Cindy and said he was at the house because George told him something was going on. They all went into the house and Cindy briefly told Lee what was going on and that she needed answers and that she was wanting Casey to take her to see Kaylee and she was refusing to do so. This is just insane. Lee thought if they all sat down together, they might get some answers, but Cindy was still insisting to know where Kaylee was and wanted to be taken to her. So Casey says basically it was too late and Kaylee would be asleep, but Cindy didn't care. She wanted to see Kaylee and know she was okay. That's all she wanted, was to just know she was okay. So Cindy was getting more irritated with Casey's excuses and threatened again to call the police. Cindy gave Lee some time alone with Casey to see if he could get anything out of her. Cindy did then end up calling the police, telling them that she has someone that needs to be arrested in her home because there's a missing child that's been missing for a month. Play another clip.
937 Hope Spring Drive.
4937 Hope Springs
Drive, Olmsted.
Okay, what's happening?
I have someone here that I need to be arrested in my home.
They're
And
there right
I have
now?
a possible missing child. I have a 3-year-old that's been missing for a month.
A 3-year-old?
Yes.
Have you reported that?
I'm trying to do that.
And Cindy is uncomfortable throughout this whole thing. In the call, she mentions about the stolen car. Don't know why it's a stolen car when it's Casey's car. While waiting for the police, Cindy was walking between the hallway and the living room, watching for the police, and Lee was still sat talking with Casey. And Cindy heard Casey tell Lee that Cindy heard Casey tell Lee that Kaylee had been gone for 31 days and that Zanny the nanny had taken her. Cindy, quite rightly, lost it at this point and started yelling at Casey, saying, "Why didn't you tell me? What do you mean she's gone?" And I can only imagine the panic she felt then. I mean, putting yourself in that position, what would you do? So now they played the third 911 call, which I have a clip of.
I called a little bit ago. The deputy sheriff saying I found out my granddaughter has been taken. She has been missing for a month. Her mother finally admitted that she's been missing.
Okay, what is
here now?
Okay, what is the address that you're calling from?
4937 Hope Spring Drive. We're talking about a 3-year-old little girl.
4937 what?
Hope Spring, HOPESPR.
And you can tell by this call that Cindy is obviously panicking and really, really upset, and her head's down while listening to this call. Casey then comes onto the phone, which I play a clip of.
My daughter's been missing for the last 31 days.
And you know who has her?
I know who has her. I've tried to contact her. I actually received a phone call today, now from a number that is no longer in service. I did get to speak to my daughter for about a moment.
And she tells them the nanny's name. And even the operator asked Casey why she didn't report it then and is only doing it now, and Casey says she's been looking for her. I think we've seen a lot of evidence up to date that she wasn't actually doing that. She was going out, being with her boyfriend, just living a life. She tells them that the nanny's name is Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez, and while Casey is actually on the phone, the police arrive. When the call is finished, Cindy when the call's finished playing in court, Cindy asks for a break, so they have a 5-minute recess. I mean, Cindy is looking totally and utterly exhausted and just drained with the whole thing. So they come back, they say the next day after, Casey's arrested, the next day the car was given to the police and all the items that Cindy had taken out of the car were given. They also took the desktop computer, a laptop, her own cell phone to get some messages from it, but they only took her phone for an hour. And Cindy also gave her DNA and hair samples. Cindy actually set up a tip line so people could call with any information they may have. Lee actually set this up. They also set up a command centre in a local shopping centre to help get the word out, to see if they could find Kaylee. On the 16th of July 2008, Cindy received a phone call from Casey after she'd been arrested. Play a clip now.
Well, I just saw your nice little cameo on TV.
Which one?
What do you mean, which one?
Which one? I did 4 different ones, and I don't know. I haven't seen them all. I've only seen 1 or 2 so far.
You don't know what my involvement is and stuff?
Casey.
Mom.
What?
No.
I don't know what your involvement is, sweetheart. You're not telling me where she's at.
Because I don't fucking know where she's at. Are you kidding me?
As you can tell from this clip, Casey is seriously pissed. Cindy tells her that if she'd just tell the truth, and at which point Casey says, "Tell you what, just give me Tony's number because I don't want to talk to you right now." Cindy says she doesn't have Tony's number. Casey says, "Well, ask Lee because he has it." So then Lee comes on the phone and he says, "I have it, but I don't know what good it will do you." So then Casey tells him to tell everyone not to bother coming to the bond hearing. Casey's friend Christina then comes onto the phone and she's telling her that Casey's telling her that the detectives have twisted everything she said and they arrested her on a whim. She said the detectives haven't listened to anything she's told them. Basically, she's trying to help them track down Zanny, but they're not listening to where to track her down, all the other places she might be. And I think at this point they're all obviously struggling with the fact that Casey knew that her own daughter had been missing for 31 days and she'd not said anything to anybody. She tells Christina that the last person who Kaylee was with was Zanny. She still keeps pressing to get Tony's number. Christina asks for the MySpace password, and then she gives Casey Tony's number. So that's it for part 2. I will be back with Cindy Anthony part 3 in the next video. So until then, bye for now.